Hello students, the HB Kapadia group of schools in collaboration with GSTV presenting a very wonderful program Pass Thawanu Panchamrut, which will be very useful for the students who will be appearing for board exams this year. Myself, Mohammad Wasim, by which we will be able to get the idea about how to get 100 out of 100 marks in the subject accounts. You all might have heard about hard work is the key to success, but a combination of hard work and smart work leads you to reach your goals. So, in these upcoming sessions, specifically for the subject of accounts, we will be focusing on how to do smart work in the subject of accounts. Yes, accounts, the most popular yet very difficult subject of commerce. But if you will put little efforts, you will be able to get 100 out of 100 marks very easily. In the very first session, we will be discussing about the paper pattern and the blueprint of accounts. For this year, government has rescheduled the whole paper pattern of accounts and divided the paper pattern into two segments, which includes 30% objective questions and 70% subjective questions. So let us start with paper pattern. See students, in the first chart, I have presented the whole paper pattern of accounts subject. Again, we are having 6 sections, section A, section B, section C, section D, section E and section F. But in this section A, this year we have 20 multiple choice questions. Yes students, 20 multiple choice questions, a golden opportunity for those students who still believe that they might get fail in account subject. So we have 20 MCQs over here, each carries 1 mark. In section B, we have 10 very short questions, that is VSQs, again carrying 1 mark each. So if you will prepare for section A and section B, those students who want to get pass only in the account subject, they can get 30 marks from section A and section B only. So section A and section B is very important for this year. In section C, we have 6 questions, and in section C, we have general options. Out of these 6 questions, we have to attempt any 4 questions. As like in previous paper pattern, the weightage of the question is of 3 marks only, but here we have a chance that we can skip 2 questions from these 6 questions. So you have a choice to skip 2 questions in section C. I am talking this thing for the students who want to get 75 to 80 marks. Those students who want to get 100 out of 100 marks, they have to do all these sums. They have to prepare for all these sums. Yes, in exams you can make option for any 2 questions. You can skip any 2 questions, but you have to prepare all the questions for board exams. In section D, the weightage is again same as in previous paper pattern. Weightage is of 4 marks. But here, instead of 4 questions, you have to attempt any 3 questions. And here also, we have total number of 5 questions. So from these 5 questions, you have to attempt any 3 questions and you can skip 2 questions. Okay students? In section E, talking about section E, weightage is same as previous paper pattern, 8 marks each. Okay, but here also you have to attempt 3 questions out of 5 questions. The most popular chapters for 8 marks are chapter number 5, admission of a partner, chapter number 6, retirement or death of a partner, and part 2, chapter number 1, accounting for share capital. So it is very clear that section E will be prepared from these 3 chapters only. So by doing these 3 chapters, you can attempt 5 questions from this chapter and you can skip any 2 questions. Talking about section F, in section F, likewise previous paper pattern, you do not have a chance to skip any question. So general options are available in section C, section D and section E only. Section F is a compulsory question, carries 2 questions of 11 marks each. You all may know that one question will be of final accounts of partnership firm and one question will be of company final accounts. So this is the whole paper pattern of this year. Remember, this paper pattern is followed for this year only, so you have a golden chance to get good marks in accounts. Now let us talk about the blueprint of the subject accounts. See students, before going through the blueprint, let us understand the weightage of each and every chapter. Here I have presented total chapter wise weightage. One thing I want to clear that this year government have segmentized the weightage into 2 sections, with general option, without general option. So your paper will be having 130 marks total. But from this 130 marks of paper, you have to attempt a 100 mark paper. And I have taken a weightage of 100 marks over here, not 130 marks. That I want to clear. From chapter number 1, from part 1, chapter number 1, Introduction to Partnership, the weightage will be of 5 marks. Okay students? One question of 3 marks will be asked in section C. 2 MCQs will be asked from chapter number 1. Okay? So total weightage of chapter number 1 is 5 marks. In chapter number 1, long sums are also given related to partner's capital account, related to partner's current account. But in board, only a short question of 3 marks will be asked from chapter number 1. Talking about part 2, chapter number 2. See students, weightage is very clear, 11 marks. No any multiple choice question, no any very short question, just a simple sum of 11 marks. Okay? In part 1, chapter number 3, the weightage is of 7 marks. That we will discuss thoroughly. In part 1, chapter number 4, total weightage is of 6 marks. In part 1, chapter number 5, total weightage is of 10 marks. In part 1, chapter number 6, total weightage is of 10 marks. In part 1, chapter number 7, total weightage is of 7 marks. In part 2, chapter 1, weightage is of 10 marks. Part 2, chapter 2, 5 marks. Part 2, chapter 3, 11 marks. Again, only one sum over there. Part 2, chapter 4, 6 marks. Part 2, chapter 5, 8 marks. And last part 2, chapter 6, 4 marks. We have just discussed the weightage of the chapters. Here we are taking a short break. After the break, we will discuss the blueprint thoroughly. Stay tuned with us. We will meet after a short break. Welcome back students to the wonderful program Pass Thawanu Panchamrut. Before break, we have discussed about the weightage of the whole paper pattern. Now, after the break, we are going through the blueprint of Standard 12 accounts paper. So let us continue with the blueprint. In section A, as we have talked earlier, you will be having 20 MCQs. Students, one thing I want to clear over here, that generally in board paper, MCQs means multiple choice questions are asked from textbook only. So it is my advice that you should study the MCQs given in textbook first, then you can refer any of the reference book. But priority should be given to the MCQs of textbook. Okay? So let us go through the section A. In section A, in question number 1 and question number 2, the MCQs will be asked from part 1, chapter number 1, Introduction to Partnership. Okay? Considering this weightage, the weightage of this chapter was 5 marks, means it is clear that 2 MCQs of chapter number 1 will be there and one sum of 3 marks will be there. So if you will do MCQs of part 1, chapter number 1, you will have 2 marks. Question number 3 and question number 4 will be asked from part 1, chapter number 3, Valuation of Goodwill, the most easy chapter of the whole syllabus of accounts. Okay, so from this chapter you have 2 MCQs. Then part 1 chapter number 4, you will be having 2 questions for chapter number 4, question number 5 and question number 6. In previous paper pattern, we had only 1 MCQ from this chapter, but now we have 2 MCQs from this chapter. So from question number 5 and question number 6, part 1 chapter 4, 2 MCQs will be asked. Up till now, I can say that from part 1 chapter number 1, 2, 3, 4, total 8 MCQs will be asked. So if you will prepare these 4 chapters only, you will get 8 marks of MCQs. Okay. Next, from question number 7 and question number 7 and question number 8, the MCQs will be asked from chapter number 5 and chapter number 5. Means both the questions have the same chapter MCQ. Okay. In question number 9, we have MCQ of chapter number 6, retirement. Yes, in the retirement chapter we have only 1 MCQ. In question number 10, in question number 11, MCQ will be asked from part 1 chapter number 7. In question number 12 and in question number 13, MCQ will be asked from part 2 chapter 1, accounting for share capital. In question number 14, MCQ will be asked from part 2 chapter number 2. So I can say that up till now, only from chapter number 6 and chapter number 2, 1 MCQ is asked. Okay. In question number 15 and in question number 16, MCQ will be asked from part 2 chapter 4. You have to note one thing, that part 2 chapter number 3, company final accounts, no multiple choice question or no short question will be asked from this chapter. So you are not required to prepare MCQs or VSQs from this chapter. Okay students, you have to do only one sum of 11 marks. In next, in question number 17 and question number 18, and MCQs will be asked from part 2 chapter number 5. In question number 19 and question number 20, MCQs will be asked from part 2 chapter number 6. Now, in short, now if I want to get a short idea from section A, I can say that except part 1 chapter number 2 and except part 2 chapter number 3, you have to do all the MCQs. Done. Second thing, except part 1 chapter number 6, retirement, and part 2 chapter number 2, accounting for debentures. Except these 2 chapters, from all the chapters 2 MCQs will be asked. So I am this concluding because you get an idea how much MCQs will be asked from each chapter. Okay student. So this is the section A having weightage of 20 marks. Now let us talk about section B. Section number B, we have 10 questions. Okay. First question will be asked from part 1 chapter number 3. I can say that from part 1 chapter number 1, you have to do only multiple choice questions students. You do not require to prepare short questions from part 1 chapter number 1. Understand? Here 2 MCQs we have to prepare, but in section B, VSQs, the first question will be asked from part 1 chapter number 3, goodwill. So I can say that from chapter 1 and chapter 2, no VSQ will be asked. In question number 22, a VSQ will be asked from part 1 chapter number 4. In question 23, VSQ will be asked from part 1 chapter number 6. Again, I can say that from part 1 chapter number 5, admission, no VSQ will be asked. In question number 24 and in question number 25, VSQ will be asked from part 1 chapter 7. So students, you should be very particular about part 1 chapter number 7 because 2 MCQs and 2 VSQs will be asked from this chapter only. Okay. In question number 26, 1 VSQ will be asked from part 1 chapter number 2. Okay. In question number 27, one VSQ will be asked from part 1 chapter number 5. Again I can say that from part 2 chapter number 3 and part 2 chapter number 4 no VSQ will be asked. So you can skip these both chapters. You do not require to prepare VSQs for these chapters. Okay. In question number 28, in question number 27 and 28, VSQ will be asked from part 1 chapter number 5. Likewise chapter number 7. Likewise chapter number 7, dissolution of partnership. In part 2 chapter 5 means accounting ratios, we have 2 VSQs and 2 MCQs. In question number 29, VSQ will be asked from part 1 chapter 6. In question number 30, VSQ will be asked from part 1 chapter 6. Let me conclude this session. I can say that from part 1 chapter 7, part 2 chapter 5 and part 2 chapter 6, 2 VSQs will be asked. Okay, so we have completed up till section B. Here we are taking a short break. After a break, we will go through section C, D, E and F. Thank you so much all to the wonderful session of Pass Thawanu Panchamrut. Before break, we have thoroughly discussed about section A and section B of blueprint. Now we will be discussing section C, section D, section E and section F of our accounts paper. See students, here in section C, you will be having 6 sums, you will be having 6 number of questions. From these 6 questions, you have to attempt any 4 questions. So here you can skip to 2 questions. Okay. Now let us discuss thoroughly. First question will be asked from part 1 chapter number 1, introduction to partnership. Second question will be asked from part 1 chapter number 4, reconstruction of partnership. Third and fourth question will be asked from part 1 chapter number 7, dissolution of partnership. And fifth and sixth question will be asked from part 2 chapter 2, accounting for debentures. Okay. So analyzing this paper pattern, I can say that we can make an option any 2 chapters. Okay. How? See students, if you will prepare part 1 chapter number 7 and part 2 chapter number 2, your whole section C will be covered. So you can make an option question number 31 and question number 32, which will be asked from part 1 chapter 1 and part 1 chapter number 4. But you should be very particular about one thing. In the account subject, there are only 2 chapters from which theory question will be asked. So if you will be planning to appear these 2 questions, you have to prepare theory questions also. One question from part 1 chapter number 7 will be asked from theory segment. Here also from part 2 chapter 2, one theory question will be asked. So we can say that from these 4 questions, 2 theory questions will be there. And if you are not comfortable with theory questions, so you can skip part 2 chapter number 2. Okay. If you are skipping this chapter, you have to do 3 chapters. You have to do part 1 chapter number 1, part 1 chapter number 4 and part 1 chapter number 7. So I have given you 2 options, choice is yours. Whether you can skip these 2 chapters or you can skip part 2 chapter number 2, accounting for debentures. But remember, if you are planning to skip these 2 chapters, you have to prepare theory question from chapter number 7 and chapter number 2. Clear? Now let us discuss about section D. In section D, 5 questions will be asked. Each carries 4 marks. Okay. From part 1 chapter number 3, C students, 2 questions will be asked. Yes, I am talking about valuation of goodwill. I can say that the weakest student have strength to get 8 out of 8 marks in this chapter, because this is the easiest chapter of accounts. So part 1 chapter 3, valuation of goodwill, is having 2 sums of 4 marks each this year. Okay. If you will prepare this chapter carefully, you will have 8 marks in section D. Now in question number 39, one question will be asked from part 2 chapter number 4, one question will be asked from part 2 chapter number 5, one question will be asked from part 2 chapter number 6. So from chapter number 4, that is analysis of financial statements, from chapter number 5, that is accounting ratios, and from chapter number 6, cash flow statement. In question number 39, 40 and 41, you have to prepare part 2 chapter number 4, chapter number 5 and chapter number 6. Now let us analyze this section D, students. Part 1 chapter number 4, analysis of financial statements. It's also a very easy chapter, but the limitation of this chapter is this is a lengthy sum which acquires your 5 to 10 minutes in exam. Minimum 10 to 12 minutes will be given for this sum, and this will take your time. Okay, this chapter is easy, and part 2 chapter number 6 cash flow statement is also easy. It is my advice that you should make an option this chapter, part 2 chapter number 5, accounting ratios, because you have to remember 14 formulas. Last year 30% syllabus was decreased, this year syllabus is not decreased, so you have to remember 14 formulas. So it is my advice to make an option this chapter. Now talking about these 2 chapters, it is my advice to prepare these both chapters. Why? Reason is very simple, students. First, you try to attempt part 2 chapter number 6 cash flow statement. These sums are short sums. Okay, these sums are having 3 activities: investing activities, financing activities, which have short sums, and operating activities, which is quite a tough activity, and the sums of operating activities are quite tough. Okay, so if in part 1 chapter number 6 a sum will be asked from investing or financing activity, you should attempt this sum. But if in part 2 chapter number 6 a sum will be asked from operating activity, you have an option to adopt this sum. Okay, so please give first preference to cash flow statement. If operating activity sum will be asked, then give preference to part 2 chapter number 4. Okay, and goodwill is compulsory, so you can make an option part 2 chapter number 5, accounting ratios. Okay, students, talking about section E. Weightage of section E is 8 marks. That was in previous paper pattern also, but this year you have 5 sums in section E. 2 sums of chapter number 5, admission, 1 sum of chapter number 6, retirement, and 2 sums of part 2 chapter number 1, accounting for share capital. I am considering that you might have knowledge of all the 3 chapters. So considering your knowledge, I can say that you might have difficulty in part 2 chapter number 1, share capital transactions. Okay, you might have said that, sir, we have problem in forfeiture entries only, rest of the sums we can do. So I want to tell you, students, this sum, part 2 chapter number 1, question number 45 and question number 46, if you will attempt these 2 sums, I bet you can save at least 10 minutes. You can save at least 10 minutes. So it is my advice to adopt these 2 questions and part 1 chapter number 5, admission. Okay, in section F there are compulsory 2 sums from part 1 chapter number 2 and part 2 chapter number 3. 1 sum of final accounts and 1 sum of company final accounts will be there. So this is the whole paper pattern and blueprint of account subject. In the next session, we will discuss about a particular chapter which have highest weightage and very easy to understand. So now we are concluding our session. We will meet in next session. Stay tuned with us in next session. Goodbye. Thank you.